And I think that I am a part of this institutionalized structure like Still Orbis. I mean, we have already spent 15 years with those conferences, so it means that we are reaching almost to a quarter century. Well, Still Orbis is fulfilling a very important duty in this field. Although there are many challenges in this sector, the pandemic also brought about many opportunities. And as we thought whether we should use our infrastructure or not in order to make benefits out of it, we found out that we had to use our current infrastructure, and hopefully we will receive the results that we have been seeking for. But once again, I would like to remind that face-to-face conversation is unique, and it's not easy to actually find an alternative to face-to-face network meetings. This platform is only providing us a mediocre alternative. We still have to come together face to face, but still, I would like to thank you for enabling us to come together where more than 1,000 people can interact with each other. So on behalf of myself and all the participants, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. So with your permission, let me continue with my presentation. So I will try to make my screen much shorter. I have problems in terms of seeing my presentation. By the way, you can click on the zoom out section on the left-hand side of the screen. All right. 2020 after 2008 financial crisis and the fluctuations, I do believe that 2020 has been one of those remarkable years where we had many fluctuations. In certain economies, those fluctuations have started as of March, and certain economies have delved into recession as of April. And it reached the remarkable levels. And of course, certain economies have recessionary process as of July and also August. Both in terms of GDP and in terms of the sectoral growth, the Turkish market differentiated itself positively. On March and April, the figures were much more negative, but with the economic precautions that have been taken as of May, we have overcome those negative issues. And on June, July, and even August, the economy recovered. And in the first quarter, the GDP rates were positive. In the second quarter, there was like 4 or 5 points of decline, and the third quarter has been announced as well. And after 3 quarters, the Turkish economy grew by 0.4%. And they also believe that the Turkish GDP was going to be between 4 or 5% growth rate, but this was such an optimist expectations. Certain institutions were expecting it to be between 4 or 6% of growth, but the developments showed us the reality, so it is not as optimistic as we thought. The 2020 is giving us the first 9 months, and the Turkish steel sector has grown by 2.6%. With the growth in October, the Turkish steel sector grew by 4.12%. And as this scenario goes on, as of November, we are expecting to close this year with a growth rate of 4.6%. When we analyze the world's crude steel production, we see that the total figure is 1.8 million tons in 2019. But right now, unfortunately, there is a reduction. So approximately there was a reduction by 10.2%. But China increased its production while Europe, United States of America, Brazil, and Japan reduced their production. As a result, with the balancing effect coming from China, I do believe that the 2020 will be closed with the same production figures as of last year. If we analyze the steel production by country, we see that Turkey increased its production by 4.2% and getting closer to its previous year production, but we will be behind the best production figures of 2010, and most probably our production rate will be 35,000 tons, and most probably next year we will reach to 37,000 tons of production. Well, I do believe as a result of those figures, the utilization rate between 70 to 80%. And thanks to the improvements in the consumption sector, the other countries will be improving as well. I mean, Korea, Germany has reduced their production by 13%. In Vietnam, there has been a positive change by 28.8%. They increased their production, especially on October. They stated that they increased their production by 110%, which I couldn't understand. Most probably, they have increased their capacity. Production capacity. So I mean, if this is the case, most probably Vietnam will surpass Turkey and even Germany, and most probably Vietnam will be the seventh biggest steel production country. But of course, we will see in the future and reevaluate the situation. In terms of the capacity utilization, we see that the Turkish market has the capacity utilization rate by 79.1%. This shows us that there is a 20% of idle capacity. 79.1% is an effective, actually, capacity utilization rate, because more than 80% is not showing us a realistic scenario. But of course, when we compare and contrast Turkey with the other countries which are reducing their capacity utilization, Turkey can still improve its capacity utilization. Well, if we take a look to the crude steel production, we have reached to 29 1,000 tons, and we can actually increase it to 37. So we hope that our capacity utilization will be going over 75%. It is at the moment around 70%. Well, in terms of the crude steel consumption, the finished steel consumption, there has been a reduction, and China improved its crude steel production by the crude steel consumption. But next year, the Europe and United States of America consumption will be improving, and most probably the Chinese crude steel consumption will be reduced. So most probably the recessionary phase, which we are expecting to see next year in China, will be balanced by the American and the European markets. That is our forecast for the next year. What about the Turkey's finished steel consumption? Well, I can say that the Turkish finished steel consumption is better with comparison to crude steel consumption. Of course, increase in the import figures has affected that. We see that there is an increase by 16.2%, and it reached to 24 million tons of finished steel consumption, and we can actually make it 28 million tons, but in the previous years it was 33 million tons. Although there has been a very remarkable improvement, still we are far away from our 2017 performance. We are differentiating ourselves from the other countries, and in 2018 and 2019, actually, we have reduced our consumption. There was a reduction, but we were expecting to recover this year. But unfortunately, on average, as of March, as of April, there was a 20% of reduction on average, and cumulatively it was a 40% of reduction, but still, I mean, the figures are quite positive. And we can say that we recovered the previous year, and hopefully next year we will recover the rest of it with comparison to 2017. This is our forecast for the future. In terms of the finished steel production, we see that we reached to the level of 30 million tons. Of course, imports have contributed to this figure, and we can actually go beyond 36 million tons at the end of this year. Well, we have seen that the long products are behind the flat products. And we see that the flat steel is actually in front of the long steel products. This is a healthy development because in the past this rate was 70 to 30, but right now it is vice versa. So the flat steel consumption can reach to 70%, and the long steel product can go down to the level of 30. But we should never forget that Turkey is located in an earthquake zone, and approximately 3.7 million households are needed, which will be earthquake resistant. So the current households will be demolished, and 3.7 million new households will be constructed. And in the upcoming 5 years, there is a target of renovating approximately 1.3 million households. And I mean, after we actually defined that those households, those buildings are not resistant against the earthquake, they are not durable, we shouldn't actually set forth a time frame, and we should immediately renovate those buildings, because you can never know when the earthquake will happen. And it will also provide an opportunity for the construction sector and also the steel sector. It will also provide good opportunities for Turkish economy to grow. So rather than spending billions of Turkish liras after the buildings have collapsed, maybe we should allocate our budget and resources for preventive measures like renovating those buildings and households, I do believe it will be much more rational choice. But we know that, I mean, it's just like the forest fires. When there is a forest, there's a fire in the forest. Everybody speaks and discusses about the preventive measures, but all of a sudden, everything is just forgotten. And as the season passes, it's not discussed anymore. Rather than buying helicopters to extinguish the fire and etc. And this is the case for the earthquake. As a civilized country, we should never allow our people to die under collapsed buildings. So that's why Turkey should immediately renovate those buildings and strengthen those buildings. And most probably, Turkey should go for the buildings which will be durable against the earthquakes, and Istanbul will be the main region that we should be focusing on. Import figures are troublesome for us. It is at a level of, I mean, almost 50%. In the European Union, for example, or if the import rate is more than 10%, people are shouting and yelling and they are stating that, I mean, we cannot tolerate this, they say. But Turkish market is one of the most free markets in terms of the imports. And I mean, Turkish market is the eighth biggest market, but still we are using imported steel by 43%, which is unbelievable. And this is the case, unfortunately, both for the long products and the flat steel. And the flat steel import share is 48.5%. And I mean, people are always saying that certain, flat steel products are not manufactured in Turkey, but this is not showing the reality. People generally prefers to import rather than manufacture and produce, but in developed countries like European Union and the United States of America, they are putting barriers in front of the imports, and they say that since we have the capacity, we cannot accept our industry to depend on the imported products. Although there is such a negative picture, Turkish industry is increasing its manufacturing capacity, and hopefully Turkey will stand on her foods rather than depending on the imports. And we can not actually focus on the exports solely. We should be precautious about it, and we should make use of our own resources, because we have seen what kind of precautions the European Union has taken so far. First, they have taken the actually the protectionist measures of the United States of America as a reason, and they stated that there will be a trade shift. And also, the United States of America increased the tax, the import tax, from 15% to 50% against Turkey. And every 6 months, by the way, they reevaluated the case, and they also changed their quotas. And those quotas have been designed based on different countries. And in order to actually add additional measures, they have started implementing quarterly quotas against certain countries, and they, try to prevent, certain increases from 15% to 3%, and there were inquiries about the dumping as well. So, last but not least, this month they actually enacted a law about implementing additional taxes retrospectively. So such kind of protectionist measures, of course, disabled us from focusing on the exports, but there has been a positive development on this case, and which is that the Trump administration have ceased to exist right now. The Biden government will not be as protectionist as the Trump government. But I mean, if you have to be.
The Trump government against China imposed sanctions for some reason, because no country doesn't want to assume the responsibility of sustaining a 360 million deficit against another country. But there is a mad style in that. You should not make this a part of political games. And in our trade, in their trade with us, the US doesn't have to impose these protection measures because we are open to the US. So imposing 25% against Turkey, then increasing it to 50% was meaningless. So Biden government has in the past stated some hostile stance against Turkey, but we know that they have some expectations from Turkey. So we believe that in some kind of agreement, the trade between the US and Turkey will reach 100 billion US dollars. If we keep this objective alive, the gap left behind by China can be filled in by Turkey. And the steel industry may more easily overcome the barriers, or otherwise, Turkey cannot export 50 billion US dollars in steel. So, for example, Vietnam exports approximately 40 billion US dollars to the US. So Turkey is an ally of the US. This would be improving the relationship. It would also have political effects. And the Turkish government gave these friendly messages. And also the European Union may eliminate the instruments of protection, which they say it is because of the US. So should we substitute the dumping tax? Should we extend these sanctions? Maybe these negotiations may go into a positive direction with the European Union, because they always talk about free and trade, and on one side and on the other side, they are imposing protection sanctions. Maybe they can stop doing that, and it would be a more healthy, more competitive steel sector. But despite this, after seeing these protectionist approaches, investing with due consideration of exports may not be reasonable. These protection measures can come to agenda once again. And because for the Europeans, free trade means Europeans selling their products all around the world, and fair trades for them means buying any product at reasonable prices from anywhere in the world. So in Turkey, the steel trade is shrinking. As we mentioned earlier, our exports is shrinking by 9 or 10%. Our imports are increasing. And so the net exporter position of Turkey is deteriorating. And our trade with the European Union, there is a sharp decline in the recent years. It has gone down from 7 million to 3 million tons. In return, the EU trade has a more stable course. It has increased by about 1%. So we are very close to setting a trade balance. In the past, this area was quite in favor of the European Union. Every year, billions of tons of steel, for example, in 2015, 5.5 million tons were exported to Turkey, but the European Union imported only 1.7 million tons. And the European Union took this as the basis, as a fair trade. Of course, I'm being satirical here. And our trade with the US, it was about 2 million tons. And because of the protection measures, it went down to 110,000 tons. But this year, there was a revival. We are about 450,000 tons. But we cannot compare this number to the past numbers. And in total, the export-import ratio is about 109%. Last year, it was about 127%. Before that, we were mostly positive. So 2020 has been quite negative for us. But despite this, Turkey is among the major steel exporters. It's ranked in the 6th place with 19 million tons, and among the importers, we are in the 12th place. To summarize, the global steel industry, as in other industries, has undergone significant changes. In this period, Turkey was focused on domestic demand rather than exports. As I mentioned earlier, in April and May, there was a tremendous decline in demand, but starting in May, particularly with the introduction of new consumer loans and with the 6% interest rate, which revived the household sector and the automobile sector, the exports were revived, but this was not sustained. The economic balance was disrupted, so the government took a more realistic approach, and the markets, responding to the market's demand, it gave higher interest to the deposit owners, and they had to reflect the same interest rates to the mortgage loans. So the consumer interest rates went from 6% to 25%. So there was an expectation that the economy may come to a standstill. But despite all this, the acceleration in consumption was sustained, though in a more slow way. Yes, the demand went down, but when the interest rate was 6.4%, the stocks were melting down, the construction industry was going on. There was the mega projects of the government, such as the Çanakkale Bridge. They are going on. The domestic automobile demand is very good. The imports are going down. Household appliances are being produced in higher amounts. So this growth will continue in the steel industry in the future. And in 2021, with the introduction of the vaccine and slowdown in the pandemic, in Europe, the economic conditions will be improved, the protectionist measures will be alleviated, there will be a more positive structure. And here, there has been a new development in the Far East. RCEP, Regional Development Structure, was created. In this structure, China, Japan, and South Korea and Indonesia is coming together. And these countries have a population of 2.2 billion people. And India may also join this union. And this will be a huge free market region. And Turkey's relationship with this territory and Turkey's trade with this territory is not very balanced. It is quite in favor of these countries. Our trade with these countries is about, in our trade with these countries, there's a deficit of about 30 billion US dollars. But with this, if India is included, this trade deficit may also increase to $34 billion. But if there are protectionist measures, as is the case in the EU, there may be an effect that the whole market could be closed, or there may be a more harmonious policy. We will see that in the future, whether there will be a more flexible or strict trade region in this area. This could be an opportunity for Turkey, or it could be a restricting factor for Turkey. In the past, in the EU, in the US, when we were hitting barriers, we were able to go to the Far East. Maybe we can do this in the future again. Now, in 2015, China was very effective in the markets, and against China's actions, the world was reacting, and China made a commitment. By the end of 2020, the capacity would shrink by 200 million tons. Okay, maybe China has shrunk down its capacity, and we also raised this issue with China, where the Deputy Minister of Economy was present. Yes, you will shrink the capacity, but we don't know if you are going to create any new capacities. And they did not respond to this question. Yes, on one side, China closed its idle capacities, these obsolete facilities, but they also created new modern capacities. In 2020, the capacity of China was able to absorb its own capacity, and it was about to become an exporter. And in the next few months, China will consolidate its position as an exporter. So the problem is here, maybe we are exaggerating, but we have seen 2015, so we are quite justified to do so. When the production stops, there is a huge threat. This capacity is about 1 billion tons. It's about 25% of the global steel production. So when there's a threat there, and this threat may cover a population of 3.5 billion people, it may designate this population as its own market. So this may be a threat. This is also applicable for the global steel industry, and we will see this in the next few years. But there is a good news. The pandemic will probably go away in 2021, but we don't know if anything negative will happen in parallel to this. So we will see this, but we expect that these protectionist approaches will be abandoned very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Veysel Bey. It has been an amazing presentation. You have given us very valuable information. Thank you. We have many questions from the audience. If you allow me, I would like to ask a few of them. But of course, I'm looking at these questions. Some of these questions are about the sales policies of companies. Veysel Bey, I guess you don't want to comment on the sales policies of companies. No, I don't want to. Sorry, we need to skip that question. We apologize from the member of the audience. Now, Sushi Banerjee from India has a question. In the first 9 months of 2020, production in Turkey was in minus. The construction industry was marginally positive. Which other industries contributed to the steel industry so that the growth was 2.6%? The manufacturing sector is not totally negative. In the manufacturing sector, the steel consuming sectors are improving. For example, construction, the public investments which use steel, they are improving. So the negative numbers in the manufacturing sector is not very negative, but we should look at the intense steel part. In domestic consumption, there is a sharp increase. Thank you very much. Çolakoğlu Metallurgy, Kürşat Çolakoğlu. In Turkey, with the restrictions on exports and with the anti-dumping tax, what will happen? Will Turkey do a retaliation for that? Does the government has any plans? Yes, we are working with the government and we believe there will be a retaliation. And from Hong Kong, Shi Wing Steel, Bobby Chow has a question. In Turkey, the consumption starting in 2017, the consumption in Turkey has a growth course. The steel industry in Turkey, in terms of the zero carbon target by 2050, what kind of changes are planned in the infrastructure of the steel industry? What kind of new regulations will be introduced? In the Turkish steel industry, about 20 years ago, we started a program for zero carbon emissions, and we are continuing that program. In our approach, the ratio of integrated facilities is 30%. Electric arc furnaces is 70%. So the carbon emissions is seven times higher. In China, 90% of the facilities are integrated facilities. This is a good thing for us. And in the future, we will take actions to reduce our carbon emissions. And already we have come a quite mile in this. And as you know, we technically support the approach of the EU in carbon emissions, but in commercial terms, we don't agree with the ambitions to impose taxes on carbons, but outside that, we support all activities towards zero carbon emissions and decarbonization. In the previous Steel Orbis meeting, we talked about this. We are against imposing taxes against carbon emissions. But we actually support the actions taken towards decarbonization. We believe that everyone in the world has a role to play it and they should fulfill their responsibilities. We are approaching the end of the session. We will ask 2 more questions. Dr. Hüseyin Soykan has a question. Every last week, 3 weeks, signed agreements for new investments. Do you expect any surplus of supply in this area? Well, there is no central planning in Turkey. So all institutions are trying to solve this issue with their own possibilities. So distinction of production is an opportunity for many companies. Sometimes there is a price difference between the construction iron and wire rod produced from the same billet, and it may be as high as $90. And maybe one company can take 1 year to make it more feasible to do this. So making one investment does not necessarily mean this product will be used. The majority of the investment is the capacity of the high furnace. The remaining investment is the distribution of the activities. So the balance between the investment and the profits should be evaluated by companies. They are doing this on the basis of their own possibilities. But in Turkey, in ready steel, there is an export potential. The manufacturers of ready steel are mainly importing these products. And I think in the future, the wire rod products will not need it to be imported. I think there will be an increase in the capacity in this area. One anonymous question, Soshin Banerjee from India, 2 questions about the same issue. This is the last question. In Turkey, the flat steel export is faced with protectionist measures in the US and the EU. So why is Turkey importing flat steel to meet the domestic demand? This is the question of Soshi Banerjee. And there is one anonymous question, if you allow me. Turkey is in the 6th place in importing, but in 12th place in exporting. So Turkey is an importing country. Well, in most of the importing countries, the reason is that they don't have the capacity. But in Turkey, we have the capacity. We are importing because that's the habit. For Turkey, 12th place is not very good because Turkey is able to respond to its own demand in steel production. We should accept that Turkey started manufacturing steel in 1940s, and after 1980s, the manufacturing was increased. So Turkey has an experience of 80 years, and particularly 40, 50 years in electric arc furnaces. So we have a knowledge to create the necessary infrastructure in terms of technology, in terms of human resources, and in terms of capital. So in Turkey, instead of importing things, you can locally manufacture them. It's no more difficult for Turkey. These numbers are not reasonable. When we look at the numbers, we can see this from India, we can see this from China, you can see this from anywhere in the world. And we believe that someday this will be seen from Turkey also. This is not reasonable. These imports should be stopped. And Turkey, because it is importing these products, we need to export. And we should avoid these protectionist measures, because these protectionist measures are not needed against dumping. It is needed because they need to protect their steel industry. They openly say this. This is a strategic sector, and we don't want to have any problems in the steel industry. We will do anything to avoid that. They start introducing carbon taxes. For example, once in the past, the European Union was talking about the rights of child workers, etc. They were also connected to that. And they are trying to find other ways to do that. And we know that they don't know any borders. They don't know any limits. So if I was doing business, I wouldn't accept this style. And they are not ashamed to talk about free and fair trade. So we should also allocate our internal capacity to our internal demand. Thank you very much, Veysel Bey. Really, it was a very informative presentation, very comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much for answering the questions also. We hope to see you soon. Have a nice day.